So have you ever wondered how to twist and teach twisting effectively? Well, today we're really going to break it down. We're going to look at the anatomy of twists, so what muscles are involved, what's actually going on. We're going to take a look at some of the common misalignments and things that happen when we twist in a yoga class, and then we'll also look at some tips for cueing so that you can really help your students to twist effectively. So first, let's talk about some of the benefits of twisting poses. So a twisting pose usually in yoga has a pavrita in front of it. So if you hear that, you know that you're doing a twist. It's poses like pavrita utkatasana, revolved chair pose, or pavrita parshvakonasana, revolved side angle, pavrita trikonasana, revolved triangle, pavrita ardhachandrasana, super challenging pose, revolved half moon. So in all these poses, the revolving that's happening is happening through the spine. And this is awesome. Like, one of the benefits of the yoga practice is that we get to move our spine in lots of different ways. And this is really good for keeping the facets and the different joints of the spine healthy and mobile, for decompressing these joints, and keeping our fluidity and our mobility in a lot of different ranges of motion. And so twisting is wonderful. And then another benefit of twisting, in addition to supporting the health of our spine, is that we compress the abdominal contents. So you may have heard the trope, oh, twists are detoxifying. Well, yes, they are, in the sense that they help our with digestion and elimination. And by squeezing and smooshing our abdominal contents, I like to call it giving ourselves an internal massage, we help to maintain blood flow to our viscera, to the organs, and also we get the organs moving against each other. So again, this is great with all movement, but twist particularly, because we're addressing the torso, really help to give these guys a good squeeze and soak. And that's really nice, because if things don't move in our body, they start to get sticky and stuck. I've seen adhesions between organs in the body. So we really want to keep all of this fluid and yummy and moving like a giant internal aquarium. So let's now look at the anatomy of twists. How do they happen? Well, they happen through muscles, as all movement does. So with twists, we are basically using muscles both on the front and the back of the body. And when we twist, the spine revolves. And so different parts of the spine can revolve more than others. So if I turn just my neck, my head and my neck, you guys try this with me at home, you'll notice that gives a lot of motion, which is good, because we need to be able to look around for predators and see what's coming. So it makes sense that this part of our spine would be pretty mobile in rotation, right? And in fact, just to get a little super nerdy on you, there is a particular joint up here between the first and the second cervical vertebrae that is like a pivot joint, right? So this at the top is really quite mobile. Again, very good, so we can see predators coming and know what's happening. If you guys have ever seen the movie Batman, you know that Batman in his old suits could not turn his head. So he always is doing this, like, wah, rah, wah, to look around. Not so effective, Batman. That is not so effective. I'm glad you got your new suit. All right, so going down the spine, the thoracic spine is pretty twisty. It twists, but the only thing that it is restricted by is these other things that are hanging onto our body called our ribs, right, which attach to each of these thoracic vertebrae. And then the lumbar spine, not so twisty. Not so much twisting happening there. And then sacral lumbar, not so twisty, and the sacrum is fused. All right, so that's how the spine is implicated. Now let's take a look at some of the muscles that facilitate this movement in our body. So the big pair of muscles that help out with this, and I call them the engines of twist, are actually on the front of our body, and they are our obliques. So we have 4 sets of abdominal muscles layered like prosciutto that wrap around our torso. And each of them does something a little bit differently, but they all work together to support us, hold us in, support the spine, a little protection for the internal organs here. So the 4 layers here, from the outward to the most inward, we have rectus abdominis, you guys. These are the washboard abs that are displayed in many a men's magazine and ladies' magazine. So those are the guys that run from our pubic bone down here all the way up to the xiphoid process. So it runs vertically along our body in little pockets, and that helps us to flex the spine, right? Then coming into the next layer, we have the external obliques. So the external obliques wrap they start way up high and they wrap inwardsly like this. This is kind of the fiber direction of the external obliques, and they kind of wrap around to the back of the body as well. So we think of them, we always think of our abs in the front. No, my friends. Your abdominals are also in the sides and even wrapping towards the back, right? So we really are kind of all wrapped up here. Okay, so those are the external obliques, and like the name suggests, oblique means diagonal. So on my little friend here, these guys are going to run diagonally. And so if we're thinking about rotation, something that's diagonal is going to help us twist, right? Because muscles pull in the direction of their fibers. So underneath the external obliques, we have our internal obliques. Now, the external obliques, if you take your hands, make little pockets here, that's the direction of your external obliques. Your internal obliques run the opposite way, right? So they have the opposite fiber direction to your external obliques, and they run right underneath. And again, they're a little lower, and they wrap around to the back as well. And then the deepest layer of our abdominals is the transverse abdominis, which, like its name suggests, is across, transversing. And that's like our little corset, right? And that attaches to the big fascial mesh here at the lower back, right? So all of them kind of come in together and wrap around the whole body, like they all come around here and attach into this big fascial aponeurosis. So it's this big fascial sheet back here. And in the front, they also attach to this long line of fascia called the linea alba. So everything's kind of like holding you in. But the engines of twist are the external and the internal obliques. So our diagonal fibers, right? So again, the externals run this way, the internals run this way, and together that helps to give us, those are like the muscles of rotation in the front and the sides. External and internal obliques. And what's kind of cool is that they work together. So if I think I've got my external obliques on this side, while my internal obliques are running like this way. So together, that's gonna help me twist this way. So if you put your hands on your ribs, put your right hand on your rib and direct your hand down. So if I move my body in the direction of those fibers, I'm gonna be twisting to the left, to the opposite side. The internal obliques coming up this way are gonna help with that line of pull and help to pull me around. So they kind of work together, right? They also help with side bending and things like that. So we got our external and internal obliques. What's happening on the back body? All right, so on the back of the body, you got lots of spinal muscles here running all up and down your spine. But we're gonna look at two particular sets called the multifidi, which you've probably heard of, multifidus, and the rotatories. So these guys run right in this kind of groove here between your spinous processes and your transverse process. The spinous process are the ones that stick out the back. Transverse to the side, sticking out the side. So these guys make like a little Christmas tree all the way down your spine, right? And again, just like the obliques, they're running diagonally, right? So when we see something that's diagonal, we think, oh, that's gonna probably help with twisting, okay? So the multifidi are a little bit more superficial, and they cover a bigger span, so 2 to 4 of these segments all the way down. And the multifidi also cover your sacrum. So down here, they get pretty thick and they cover your sacrum. So if you take your hand to your sacrum, which is this triangle, bony structure right here at the base of your spine, and you give yourself a little scrub, you're scrubbing your multifidi. It's really nice. All right, so that's the multifidi. They run from top to tail. Again, little diagonal pattern, but they cover 2 to 4 vertebrae. And then underneath that, we have tinier ones called the rotatories. And the rotatories are 1 to 2 segments here. So they're tinier, right, and underneath these little diagonal fibers, but same kind of direction, same kind of idea. So both the multifidi and the rotatories also help us with twisting. I mean, they're super important in just stabilizing our spine in general, but because of their diagonal direction, they also help to twist the spine, and they twist us in the opposite direction. So because of their fiber direction, if you engage the ones on your right side, you're gonna be twisting to the left. So there we have it. Those are really the muscles that are involved in the action of twisting. So sure, other muscles are gonna stabilize you, etc., but these are the big guys: the obliques, the abdominal obliques, the rotatories, and the multifidi. So one of the benefits of the yoga practice is that we get to move our body and our spine in lots of different directions, which is awesome. However, oftentimes when we're doing twists in yoga, we start compensating with a lot of other movements, right? So we don't often do just pure rotation of the spine. And you know, that's okay. It's great for our spine moving lots of different directions. However, when we're doing twists, it can be useful for us to focus on a pure rotation. In other words, not compensating by doing a lot of other movements, but really focusing on just giving our spine that opportunity to twist. And the reason why I think that this is helpful is because we want to keep fluidity in our body in all of its ranges of motion. And if we continually kind of compromise our twists or do something else, we're not really maximizing that ability of our spine to get its full range of movement in the transverse plane, in that kind of direction. So I say, hey, let's really focus on what it looks like to just twist, to do a pure twist and to not compensate with a lot of other stuff. So let's take a look at that and what that looks like in the yoga practice. So let's start off by looking at a really simple twist, Parivrtta Utkatasana, revolved chair pose. And so when I come into Parivrtta Utkatasana, usually the knees are together, right? So I just want you to watch my spine. Usually the knees are together, and the idea is that I'm going to take my elbow and bring it all the way across my body. So in a pure rotation, I would just keep my spine in line with the center of my knees, right, and twist. However, when we ask our students to come into this pose, usually we say, bring your elbow to the opposite knee, so they round. Can you see what happens? They're rounding so they can get their knee across, right? That's one of the common things that we do. So when we come into twist, rather than actually rotating through the axis of our spine, we usually start by flexing the spine, right? Doing something like this to get into it, and then we're trying to like recompensate and come out of it. So that's one way in which we might compensate in a twist. Another way is a back bend. Oftentimes when students come into the pose, right, they'll come and then they'll fling their chest open. So if I stand up, you can see I'm in extension. So there's nothing wrong with flexion and extension, but when we're doing pure rotation, we really want to focus on just giving our spine the opportunity to do that movement. Another thing that can happen is lateral flexion, right? So this is called lateral flexion through the spine. And this happens a lot. I come in, I hitch my side of my waist to try to get my elbow across. Yeah, a lot of this is coming from the way that we're cueing the pose, right? So if I say to people, bring your elbow across your knee, well, they're going to think that's what I'm supposed to do. And so they get it there by any means necessary, whether it's rounding or whether it's laterally flexing in their spine. And although this is nice to do in yoga, it's not a twist. So how do we help our students get into a pure twist without doing all of these compensatory, though nice, spinal compensations? Well, we can help them out by the way that we cue them into the pose. So let's take a look. Say I'm bringing my student into Parivrtta Utkatasana with their knees together. Right, one thing that I can cue them to do, and I do this before I have them come into the twist, I call this a stabilizing cue, because what we're doing is we're giving them some pre-stabilizing actions to do to make sure that when they move into the twist, they do it properly. So one thing we can do is, instead of cueing students to take their elbow across their knee as the first thing, because that's going to cause the hips to swing out, the elbow to come across, by any means necessary, folks, by any means necessary. Instead, I can give them some stabilizing cues before so that they're aware of what they're supposed to do. So cues like keep your knees squeezing together and even so that the hips don't pop out, right? Which leads to this kind of lateral rotation as well, or this lateral flexion as well. And I can also cue them, I like this one, to keep their nose aligned over the center of their knees, the space between their knees. Because often when we bring the elbow across, what we do is swing out, right? If you look at me from the front, I'm swinging out. So instead, what I'm trying to get them to do is to keep their whole spine lined up. Center of the feet, center of the knees, nose. So if I get them to keep that plumb line, then I'm helping them to find rotation rather than flexion, right? So I could say, keep your nose aligned over the center of your knees as you twist to the right. And maybe they need to bring their hand Maybe they could bring their elbow between their knees, or if they can keep their nose aligned over the center of their knees, then they could place the elbow outside of the thigh. And this is going to help my students. Very barky dog. And so this cue is going to help my students to keep that plumb line and not start, flexing or rounding or arching in different ways. Let's look at a super common twist now. Parvrita Parsvakonasana, revolved side angle, which is really lunge with a twist. Okay, so here I am. Hips are nice and square. Let's just keep the knee down for now. Hinging forward. Again, the tendency here, if you watch the side of my waist, is going to be to round, right? It's going to be to flex the side of the waist to get the elbow across, which looks a little bit like this, right? So instead, I might cue my students, hey, keep both sides of your waist long as you open your twist to the right. Or I could even say, keep your nose aligned to the inside of your knee as you turn your chest to the right, right? And then we always have the option too to cue the lengthening through both sides of the waist. Usually it's this one that gets crunchy. So I could say keep the right side of your waistline long as you twist open to the right. Right? So that'll help students kind of keep some awareness of where their spine should be in space rather than immediately kind of compensating into it. One thing to look at when students are in the twist is the tendency to either back bend in the twist. I'll show you from this side. They'll back bend the twist, or they'll round and flex the twist. Have you guys seen this? What? And really what we want is for the spine to stay neutral, right? So when students get into the twist, or even before they're coming in, I might say, keep an awareness, pull your front ribs in as you draw your shoulders onto your back, and keep that stability as you turn your chest open. Or once they're in the twist, I might say, pull your ribs in as you draw your shoulders onto your back. Oh, right, to keep the front and the back body even. That could even be another way you say it. Keep the front and the back body even as you rotate open to the side. Now, as we talked about in the spine earlier, the lumbar spine doesn't have so much twist. Thoracic has a bunch, neck has a bunch. So you may also see students compensating by turning their heads. Have you ever seen this? It's kind of like, come into your twist, and they're like, whoa, right? And I'm not twisting at all in my spine. I'm just turning from the part that's the easiest, which is the head, which is nice, it's good to move that, but we don't want to do that at the expense of everything else. So one thing that I like to do, which kind of has a double benefit here, is to keep students' gaze on the floor. So, as they're coming forward, and you guys, here's one thing too. Another tip, so many tips. Another tip as you're coming in is to have students hinge forward first. If I come into a twist from being upright, chances are I'm going to round to get into it, right? But if I come from a hinge with the sides of my waist long and set that up first, then I have a better chance of keeping that as I turn open. So when you're teaching your twist, whether it's Parsvakonasana, Trikonasana, Utkatasana, any of the twists, have students come forward first, bring their chest parallel to the floor, keep both sides of the waist long, and rotate from there. That's going to give you more of a chance to support them to keep that nice long spine. Okay, sorry, back to my 2 for 1. So when I have students come into the twist, I'll have them keep their gaze on the floor. So again, I like my nose to the inside of the knee cue, so I'm keeping my spine nice and lined up. And what this does is, one, it helps them keep the spine straight so that they're not flexing or kind of rounding over to one side. And it also prevents them from just twisting in their neck, right? So first I get them to twist through their spine, and then maybe if they've got their balance, then they could turn their head open. But the head's kind of the last thing and the least interesting part, because we know that can twist, right? What we really want to do is get into the rest of the spine and give these abdominal organs a nice big squeeze. So let's talk a little bit how the breath can support your twists. So when we inhale, we create usually a little expansion through the chest. As we exhale, we have the opportunity to engage the abdominals. So when I teach a twist, one of the greatest tools in my toolbox is cueing to the breath. So we know that we want the spine to be nice and long. So I can cue students, inhale to lengthen, exhale to twist, inhale, lengthen. I love using the breath during their hold. Exhale, use your core, wrap it around to engage, right? Because I'm using these obliques so I can engage the core here to help support me and deepen the twist, right? So that's another great way to use the breath to support you. Now, when I bring students out of the twist, rather than having them exhale to twist, that can tend to cause a little collapse. So when I cue twist, I have students, inhale, lengthen, exhale, twist, inhale to untwist. Because I find that coming out on the inhale gives students a little bit more buoyancy, a little bit more support, so they don't just kind of flop out of the position. Let's also talk about the shoulders for a moment. So the shoulders aren't involved in twisting, right? They're not really involved in the spine. However, they can kind of help us in terms of first evaluating how our twist is going, and engaging certain muscles in the shoulders can actually help us to enhance our twist. So let's come back to Parivrtta Konasana because it's a pretty easy one to see, right? So oftentimes we'll see students kind of collapsing in their shoulders, but we want to keep the chest nice and broad and stay lifted in the twist, right? So drawing the top shoulder back can be helpful. Also, squeezing the top shoulder blade a little bit more towards the spine helps to engage the rhomboids, which are the muscles on the back of our body that connect our scapula, our shoulder blade, to our spine, right? So by squeezing that in, I'm helping to, right, kind of open the chest here a little bit. Also, when I press my elbow into my thigh and press down and actually pull my left shoulder blade away from my spine a little bit, whoa, what I'm engaging on that side, and this is a little bit of a nerd alert, you guys, what I'm engaging on that side as I protract or I abduct my scapula and pull it away from the spine is a muscle called serratus anterior. Now bear with me here. Serratus anterior is a muscle that connects underneath your scapula and helps to pull and wrap it around your body, right? And if you'll notice the angle of that muscle here, serratus anterior and the external obliques feed into each other. They're like little finger friends, okay? And so they wrap around. So when I pull my shoulder blade away from my spine here and engage serratus anterior, that creates like a tension and a connection into the external obliques, which is what I need to twist open to this side. So there's a little chain, a little wrapping that can happen all the way from my shoulder blade across my torso in the direction of my twist. Isn't that cool? So just to recap that, when we're twisting, right, the top shoulder blade wants to pull towards the spine a little bit to keep the chest nice and wide. And the bottom shoulder blade, so by pressing my elbow, watch this, here I am, not so great. When I press my elbow into my knee and pull my shoulder blade a little bit away from my spine, wrap it around my rib cage, that helps to tone this line of action from underneath my shoulder blade across the external obliques, right? Which helps me to twist to this direction. So it all kind of starts to work together. So cool. So just to recap, everybody, what we've looked at today are the benefits of twist, so that yummy, squishy, give your abdominal organs a little squeeze. Also, engagement of the obliques, the core, and the deep muscles of the spine. So we looked at the benefits. We also looked at the muscles that were involved, the obliques here, externals and internals, as well as the multifidi and the rotatory along the back. We've looked at why pure twisting is important to mobilize the spine and those spinal segments in rotation rather than letting them compensate and maybe avoid a movement that might be challenging for them. We looked at in yoga practice how it's so easy when we're twisting instead to go into flexion, extension, lateral flexion, and how we often get students doing that by the way we cue them into the pose. And we looked at some strategies for helping students to really stay in pure rotation, that is to stabilize the pelvis, to keep both sides of their waist long, to really connect the front and the back of the body together so they're not arching or rounding the spine. And also, one of my favorite cues is to let them line up their nose with the inside of their knee, which can keep the spine in this nice straight direction and maybe avoid some of that twisting and turning. We also looked at the breath, how the inhale can help to create length, and the exhale is a great time to engage the core to move more deeply into the twist. And finally, we did a little nerdy dive into the shoulders and how you use your shoulder blades can help you to enhance the efficiency of your twist. So I hope that was fun for you. Try it out in your practice, try it out in your classes, and as always, let me know how it goes. And if you like these kind of tips and tricks for yoga teachers, please subscribe for more information. First, let's talk about some of the benefits. Oh my God, that was too funny.